part 2 of digging into fantasy football ADPs and comparing them to Vegas's season-long stat projection lines. Now, I went through 6 in part 1, and that was my best performing video I've posted on this channel. God, whoever commented for me to stop smacking my lips, I will try. I don't even notice it. I finally just noticed it there. But we have 7 on the list today. We're just going to compare these players and their fantasy football ADPs versus their Vegas lines. And I think it tells us a lot about where we can find value in our fantasy football drafts. And you'll see what I'm talking about. So we're going to start off with the running back position, and that one is kind of tough to find, at least this early in the offseason, because it is July still, and there's not a lot of receiving lines out yet. And so obviously at the running back position, there are a lot of receiving running backs that, like Alvin Kamara, for example, his rushing is going to be way lower than everyone else's, but he's going to make up with that receiving. Those lines, at least on the sites I looked at, can't find them yet, so worth noting. But the first one I want to talk about is Breece Hall versus James Conner. They both have the exact same rushing yard line at 900 yards. James Conner is projected for 2 more rushing touchdowns. And yet they go at Breece is RB12 and RB13 in PPR and standard, and James Conner is RB20 in both. A multi-round difference. And in 2024, their receiving, I just dug into their receiving stats last year. Breece Hall had 57 catches, 483 yards, and 3 touchdowns. James Conner, 47 catches, 414 yards, and 1 touchdown. So about a 20-point difference there. Now, factoring about a 25-point difference there as opposed to the touchdowns, which is a 12-point difference, there's not much of a difference here between their projected fantasy points. And in my opinion, this just shows me that James Conner is an absolute gem. And Breece Hall, he's one of the risky players, I think. And I'm going to do a video soon diving into the risky players like Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, Marvin Harrison Jr., those type of guys, and basically choose if I'm drafting them or passing on them. But yeah, I mean, this is a huge difference in ADP for pretty much the same exact projections in rushing, and James Conner even has an edge. So that certainly is interesting to me. But that is all I had at the running back position. We do have 1 at tight end, 1 at quarterback, and 3 at wide receiver. 4 at wide receiver. So I'll get into the first wide receiver one. And that is going to be Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, and Jalen Waddle. Very, very different ADPs and very, very similar receiving lines. Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, and Jalen Waddle all have a 950-yard receiving yard line for the season. Garrett Wilson and George Pickens at 4.5 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle at 5.5 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson is drafted wide receiver 14 and 15 between PPR and standard. Pickens and Waddle are back in the 28, 29, 31, 33 range at the wide receiver position. Now, I dug into their receptions over the past few seasons. Pickens kind of hovers around 60 receptions. Jalen Waddle last year was a very off season for him. He had like 58 off the top of my head. The 2 seasons prior was in the 70s, and his rookie season he had over 100. Garrett Wilson had 101 last season. So in PPR formats, the receptions definitely do, make up for this ADP a little bit with Garrett Wilson. But I do think it is a little bit different with Justin Fields at quarterback. I don't imagine that his reception line is really going to be that inflated compared to these other guys. I think it's pretty safe that Pickens is a 50 to 60, 65 reception guy. Even in the new situation, that's just his style of play. Waddle is a wild card, right? We've seen him have 100. We saw him have under 60 last year. But I think a safe bet is kind of in the 70s. And with Garrett Wilson getting 100 last year, I think that should come down with the passing volume with Justin Fields, who's only projected for a little over 2K yards and under 20 passing touchdowns. So I do like Garrett Wilson. This is not to kind of point out that he's overvalued. Maybe he is a little bit with passing volume. I do think he's a fairly safe pick, though. Maybe a bit of a capped ceiling. But these other two being drafted like multiple rounds later, 15 receivers later than Garrett Wilson, and there's not that big of a difference between their season-long projections. So for me, that was something I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on in fantasy drafts. If I miss out on Garrett Wilson, like, you know what? Pickens and Waddle will be there later, and I might just get similar production there. We'll go into the third receivers, the second receiving yard lines. T. Higgins versus Devontae Adams and Mike Evans. All of the receiving yard lines are 935, 964, 950. So T. Higgins has about a 15 to 35 yard edge there. Not a very big difference. Receiving touchdowns, Higgins is the least at 7.5. Adams 8.5. Evans 9.5. PPR and standard ADPs, pretty similar. Adams is the same on both. T. Higgins is wide receiver 14 and 15. Evans is 19 and 20. Now, gladly, these ADPs aren't drastic, right? But there is a difference. There is pretty much a full round at least difference between T. Higgins and Devontae Adams, and a little even more between Higgins and Evans. And again, I'm not making this video to call out, at least for these last two. I think Hall could be a little overvalued, but he also has a high ceiling. I think Wilson maybe a tad overvalued. Higgins maybe a tad overvalued. But the point is just to say that I think you're getting very similar production out of Higgins, Adams, and Evans. And this is really the perfect example of missing out on T. Higgins. And I think Underdog, he goes late second round. Other platforms maybe a tad bit later. But Evans and Adams are going at least a round later than him. And I really, obviously Vegas agrees with me, but I think that there's going to be very, very similar production, and they have very similar play styles, very similar scoring opportunities in their offenses, respectively. So I think those two, Evans and Adams, are just a little bit cheaper T. Higgins, in my opinion. And we'll get to the next one. Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, and one of my favorite values at wide receiver is Jauan Jennings. This one was one of the more insane ones on this list to me, because this is crazy. Xavier Worthy, 840 yards and 6.5 touchdowns. Jameson Williams, 875 and 6.5 touchdowns. But Jauan Jennings, 925 and 1 touchdown less than those guys. ADPs in standard leagues, meaning receptions don't even matter. Wide receiver 28 and 27 compared to wide receiver 37. So standard leagues, for standard leagues, these stats that I'm going through in projections are absolutely ginormous. PPR, not quite as much because they'll take in receptions. But the thing with receptions is, again, the reception lines are not out yet, or from what I have looked at. But Worthy and Jameson Williams had 59 and 58 receptions last year, and Jauan Jennings had 77. They had 20 more receptions, and that receiver... Now, obviously, Jameson Williams, pretty much the same situation, if you ask me. Xavier Worthy, I don't know. You could say, well, he didn't break out till the second half of the season, so he should have more receptions. Or you can say, Rashee Rice is back, so I wouldn't expect more receptions there, which is kind of where I would lean. I think he could be a 50 to 60s, 50s and 60s for receptions for him. Jauan Jennings, though. No Deebo Samuel. Ayuk is on the PUP list. Ricky Pearsall and him are going to be running that receiver room. Obviously, Kittle and McCaffrey are there. But I think he is going to beat them in receptions in PPR. It's wide receiver 24, 25 for the top two. And Jauan Jennings, wide receiver 33. I called him out, and I think one of my first 4 wide receiver target videos, I had Jauan Jennings in there. And I didn't even have this stat up in for that video. I kind of wish I noticed this first, but... holy shit, right? This is a screaming value. 1 less touchdown, but 75-ish more yards, and he should have more receptions as well. So then the The next one is, this one is a fade for me. Travis Hunter, going at about wide receiver 30. He's dipped a little bit. He was up in the top 20s. I think he's like wide receiver 28 on Underdog. PPR leagues, he's wide receiver 31 and wide receiver 36 for standard. But his receiving yard line, 750 yards and 4.5 touchdowns. Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, both at 775 receiving yards, and I didn't see any receiving touchdowns out yet for them because we don't know if it's going to be Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones at quarterback. So those will come out, but Pittman has really been a 3, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns per season type of guy. So I think that is going to be a pretty close line for him. If I had to guess, anywhere from 3.5 to 5.5. So it's going to be very similar. And Josh Downs, I think, might have a touchdown higher, might just be the same. But I think when this receiving touchdown line comes out, it's going to be very similar to this 4.5. It might just be the same. But wide receiver 36 compared to wide receiver 44 and wide receiver 49 for standard leagues where receptions don't matter. And if I had to guess, Downs and Pittman's numbers for receptions probably going to be higher, especially Downs, and especially if Daniel Jones is the starter. And then PPR league where receptions do matter, 31, 46, and 50. This is just like, I've been blabbing about Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. I know I'm a Colts fan, but they are screaming values. Downs, I think, is going to have a breakout season. Even if he doesn't, he's going to finish above his ADP. Pittman, I think I talked about him in a bounce back video, which I haven't edited yet, so I don't know when I'm going to post this. I'm going to post this before that one because I love these videos. Wide receiver 50 is crazy to me. He's been top 24 outside of his rookie season. He's been top 24 in 3 seasons in a row up until last year where he was wide receiver 44 in a terrible season with a terrible quarterback. When he's playing with a fractured back and missed 1 game, was the wide receiver 44. I would very, very much project him to finish better than his worst career year last year. And even if not, even if he has this same terrible year, he's beating his wide receiver 50 ADP. So I think Downs and Pittman are values. Hunter, I have been avoiding because I think there is a huge, everyone wants him to play a lot on offense. I don't really think we know. I mean, they've talked about him playing on offense primarily, but what happens if a corner goes down? He has to play more on that side of the football. I think there's a lot of question marks with his usage and playing time on offense, yet he's going ahead of freaking Jauan Jennings, who's projected for, I could have put Jauan Jennings in this too. Jennings goes in the same range as Travis Hunter, and he's projected for almost 200 yards and a touchdown more, and his receptions will be more as well. I should have popped Jauan Jennings up in this again so you can be reminded, but takeaway from this one, Travis Hunter, a little overvalued, especially when you pop up all the receivers going around his range have higher lines than him because of the uncertainty, and Downs and Pittman, very undervalued. Next, we will go to the quarterback one, which is not extremely important, but I just thought it was worth pointing out, more specifically for best ball leagues. Trevor Lawrence and Geno Smith, they have a 50-yard passing line difference and a 1 passing touchdown difference. But Lawrence goes as QB 19 and Geno is QB 25. And we've seen Geno finish as a QB1 and up in the top half of the league. And we've seen Trevor Lawrence struggle and do nothing, get injuries. But obviously this ADP is because people are high on the Jaguars offense with Liam Cohen coming in, adding Travis Hunter, healthy Brian Thomas, running backs. We're projecting a Lawrence breakout for the 3rd or 4th year in a row. Geno Smith, I just think, has been undervalued for this is the 3rd year in a row where he's beat his ADP. Now, I don't think Geno would be drafted in a normal fantasy football league, and Trevor Lawrence could be at the end of the rounds. I think he'll be kind of a waiver wire guy, so maybe not the most important thing for those type of leagues, but if you're drafting for best ball, you can wait multiple rounds for Geno Smith, and in my opinion, and Vegas's opinion, get very similar production. And if you ask me, going to the Raiders where Pete Carroll is the head coach and has had success with Geno Smith, picking up Ashton Genty, still has Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, and Chip Kelly at offensive coordinator, who has ranked first in pace in the 4 offenses he's ran in the NFL every single season. He might not have JSN, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, but he does have Brock Bowers, Myers, Ashton Genty, Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll. So that's a value to me. And not that I hate Trevor Lawrence, I just think Geno Smith is very overlooked. And the last one is going to have 5 different tight ends, and I have multiple points to make. I'll pop it up now. I already have Kelsey and Njoku. I talked about that in the last video where they have the same receiving yard line. Njoku's projected for more touchdowns, yet is tight end 9 or 10 compared to Kelsey at tight end 5. I yapped about that for a lot in the last video, so I'll stay away from it here. But I first want to talk about TJ Hawkinson. I think I'm kind of noticing he might just be a little bit overvalued. His receiving yard line is 25 more than Kelsey and Njoku, and he's projected for less touchdowns than both of them, yet goes as tight end 6. So this is kind of another like Njoku versus Hawkinson. You have 25 less yards for Njoku, but 2 more touchdowns. Hawkinson has never really been a touchdown scorer. That's a bit of a discrepancy, if you ask me. And even would like to mention Colston Loveland down here, 75 less yards than Hawkinson, but 1 more touchdown, goes outside the top 12 tight ends in standard. And again, with comparing Loveland to Njoku and Kelsey, like Kelsey, 50-yard difference, same touchdowns, way cheaper. Njoku, 1 less touchdown, 50 less yards. They go around kind of the same, though. A little bit cheaper for Loveland, but... And then I know you're probably wondering, why is Tyler Warren in this graphic? Again, I'm a Colts fan. Would love to stand behind him and hype him up all offseason long. But I do think he may be a little bit overdrafted, and you can see here why. He's got the same 4.5 touchdowns as Loveland and Kelsey, and 1 less than David Njoku. He goes right behind Njoku in standard and right ahead of him in PPR. He goes ahead of Colston Loveland, who has 150 more yards projection-wise, and he's 200 less yards than Njoku and 1 less touchdown, which I think with rookies it's a little different because there's a ton of uncertainty. We don't know who Warren's quarterback's going to be. We don't know what his target share is going to look like. If you ask me, the Colts tried super hard to integrate their tight ends last year, and they tried way too hard and way too often because our tight ends were absolute dog water last year, and they dropped everything and couldn't get separation or make contested catches. Warren can do that. So, he is going to be getting those targets, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit expensive to have that low of a projection to go right next to a proven guy like Njoku or somebody probably with more upside because of the offense and Colston Loveland, even though he's got his own risk and uncertainty. But I don't know. My takeaway here is Njoku is a screaming value over Kelsey. Honestly, you might get very similar production with TJ Hawkinson, who also is a borderline top 5 tight end. I have Njoku ranked ahead of both of them in my fantasy football guide, which that will be linked below. This is what it includes. I've been working on it. Took me a few weeks to make, and now periodically throughout the week when I have time, I'm going and adding more stats and predictions and takes and stuff like that. So that'll be linked down below. But yeah, so takeaway, Njoku value, Kelsey and Hawkinson overvalued, Tyler Warren overvalued, Loveland definitely worth a dart throw going behind all of these guys, but with better or similar production or projections than pretty much all of them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed these. I'm going to see if I can go around, and especially probably towards the end of July and August, maybe when more running back receptions and receiving projections are out, and quarterback rushing too as well will help with stuff that not all of those are out now. So, and it's kind of tough to, mix those together for ADP, but yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I learned a lot just digging through this and picking out values and even overvalued players. And before I end the video, like all of these, every single one of these lines I found on Underdog. So if you want to, if you think some of these projections are dumb, you want to take a higher or lower than, fade or hop on the wagon for some of these guys. If you join with the code Fortune, they will give you up to $1,000 for free, meaning whatever you deposit is going to get doubled. I always tell people when I got on all these apps, when I turned 18, I was cheap and I threw $10 in and I got doubled and I got a free $10, which you can do that. That's nice to have a free $10 to place. But if I could do it again, I would have put about 100 in, which I did for one app, and I got a free 100 with it. And as soon as I made my 100 back, I took it out, and then I just had free money to use. So you'll get that if you join with the code Fortune. You can also do best ball fantasy drafts, a couple dollars for entries. But yeah, comment down below what you guys thought about these discrepancies and if you want to see a part 3.